Thanks a lot, Nikki. I hope everybody can hear me. So Nikki was introduced to me from a mutual friend, and we have so I presented in one of our universities. So I was like, she's a very good friend, and Nikki was like a very enthusiastic person. He asked me if I can be a person to talk about. Although my experience is not as much as the audience here, but I would like to share a little bit about myself, what I'm passionate about, and we can free roll a bit based on the kind of things you want to hear about me or what my opinions are, and then we can go ahead. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Perfect.
That's perfect.
So I don't have any presentation with me right now, but I just talk a little bit about myself. So right now, as you can see, I'm in San Francisco. Uh, I work at Apple. I work as a research scientist in improving Siri for international languages. Um, so to talk a little bit about myself from the beginning, how it all started so I'm originally from India. And so as many of you might know that India has 22 official languages, and language is the way we connect with each other. Um, so when I was growing up, I never learned my mother tongue. I only speak my mother tongue even now. Um, and I speak two other languages, so English and Hindi, which is the mostly spoken in majority of India. So how I realized was, how do I understand language? What is, as a kid itself, like how do I perceive language? Even though I don't read or write a particular language, I still understand it like proficiently. So then so in India, we have a billion people, so there's competition everywhere. So we are struggling to get into the universities, to get to the top universities. So once I got into the university, I was lucky to have introduced to various research areas. So this was the first institute, it's called Triple IT Hyderabad. And it was the first institute which has research in undergrad itself. And the moment I was exposed to research in undergrad, I was like, okay, this is very interesting. This is not a typical course-based curriculum. It's more understanding the research problems and trying to solve these problems. And that's where I realized that, okay, my passion for languages has always been there. So I want to work on languages and understanding language is better. How do I understand language, and how does the system understand language? So this was like 10 years ago. And the way it was then, it was just the budding field. Language technologies were there for a long time, but it was still, computer vision was more popular than language technologies. So then I started working on machine translation. So India, at my university, we had a funded project from the government where we were working on English to Indian languages and Indian language to English. Um, so then I was like, when I started building products for a common man to use, I was very motivated. Like, okay, my software is being used by a normal person for translating text when traveling, especially in tourism. Then I got in touch with a lexicographer from London, actually from Brighton. Adam Kilgariff, if some people might know. So Adam Kilgariff was the pioneer of software into lexicography. And we were working on research projects together. So we were trying to build software to help teachers in teaching a particular English language or any language to their students. And we were trying to build some software in that. So I was freelancing for 3 years, working with them. And that's how I actually know most people in the linguistic area in Europe. Um, then after that, I went on to work with IBM. If you might know IBM Watson, I was working for IBM Watson as a research scientist, where we're trying to solve medical research problems. So basically, for cancer research, we were trying to identify solutions for doctors to prescribe to the patients who have a particular cancer. So basically, we are trying to identify from the documents what are the side effects for the particular patient if we use a particular. But these are primarily all the data based. And then I was so motivated primarily because the software that we were using was saving lives. And then I went on to do my PhD from Germany. So I graduated last year, where I was working on summarization. So given a document, the goal is to make a summary of these document. And so my whole idea was, can I use a human in the loop in making things better? So can we learn from the human how they do it, and then do it much better, do it with the help of the user. So that was the primary the main topic of my research. And then I went on to do my internship at Apple in the Bay Area. And I was mainly working on low resource language. This is again my passion, where working on international languages has always been my passion. So what works for English might not work for other languages. So our goal is to make right now our goal is to make Siri better for all other international languages. um, Trying to learn from, if you have less resource, how do we learn? If we have privacy concerns, how do we learn? So at Apple, what I've realized is privacy is a major point that we take pride of. So we don't want to use the user's data. So that brings up another challenge for machine learning people, that how do we make the model better if we don't have data? So we solve interesting problems, although keeping the user in mind, that, okay, we don't want to invade the privacy of the user. So we have to think innovative, in innovative methods to try to solve problems. So that's one thing that I really enjoy here. Um, I'm not sure how much I can tell you about the inside projects, but yeah, feel free to ask questions. That's my broad projects and topics that I've worked on. Yeah, Marcus, go ahead.
What are the secret projects you're working on right now?
Unfortunately, if I have to tell you, I have to kill you.
Okay, you find me, you can kill me.
No, jokes apart, unfortunately, I cannot
No,
talk
no,
about
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. But I do have a question. I
Yes.
think, unless I'm mistaken, many years ago, there was an effort, I think it might have been by the United Nations, to have a global language. I think it was called Esperanto or something.
Right.
Do you think we're ever going to have a global language? And if
So,
so, where is it going to come from?
so that's a very good question. So Esperanto is a man-made language. So we created it. However, the advantages of Esperanto is words had unique meaning. So they did not have. The problem is, when you transfer from one language to other, is it could mean something else in one language, and the moment you transfer. So we want to have definite definitions. That's why Esperanto was created. However, I don't see a global language coming up, because I think the diversity is what makes us so unique. So in this global world, we will always have languages, and there are some languages dying, unfortunately, but we'll still have prominent uses. The languages will still stay.
And I'm sorry to take this over. How many different languages spoken by significant numbers of people are there right now?
Um, I would say this could be, probably I might be wrong, but it should be more than 50, more than 50, 50 to 60. So
Right.
these are some languages which all the big companies, all the support or trying to support software for these languages. So this is definitely around 50 or more than 50.
Gosh, thank you.
But again, so there's a lot of software which doesn't support Indian languages, and there are 22 official languages, but there are 4,000 languages there. So, and again, India is a 1 billion country, so there's a lot of users who speak a particular language.
Kat, sorry, Kat, I'm sure you've got some questions to ask, given that you've got Vail being planned starting tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Avinesh. I heard recently someone predicted that actually we would be able to all speak an identical language within the decade. Are you familiar with a prediction like that? Does it hold any credence?
I'm not sure if I heard of it, but I'm also a bit skeptical about that, uh, primarily because so English has been there for a long time. People speak English, but people also have their mother tongues. It's very hard for people to, I, even if, because the education system doesn't change. So there is education system where you're learning languages.
If Marcus has his way, it will, right, Marcus?
Absolutely.
And indigenous languages, they say that every time we lose one, we lose a library, a culture, a whole Wikipedia of medical solutions. What can we do to support that from happening, keep that from happening?
that that's a very good question again. So yeah, so we are hearing about languages which are being lost. So what has been observed, at least, is if the language is only in the spoken form, it will be vanished in a couple of years. The language should have a literature, it should have technology support, where we can digitize the text. That's one way. What I see is to preserve the language. I also think every language has its own uniqueness and its properties. But I think technologies or the companies are trying to make technologies available for bringing the indigenous languages out. So there's a conference from the NLP community, the natural language processing community, where it's focused on specifically indigenous languages from Africa. So there's been a lot of support these days, and I also assume that this support will only increase in the coming days.
Thank you.
What's about the idea that everyone has just an equipment like this and it's translated automatically in his own language, whatever he or she hears?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. What's about the idea that everyone has an AirPod or something like this, and or what he can hear, with different languages will automatically transferred in his own language? What's about this idea?
That's a good question again, and so to answer that, there are softwares. So a lot of people are trying right now. Again, so our competitors and are trying to bring up a real-time translation.
Mhm.
There is a software, I'm not sure, actually they're selling the device.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly, I don't remember the exact name of the company, but what they were doing was they were specifically targeting tourism domain for translation. So whenever somebody is trying to travel to a new country, they can do real-time translations. General translations is still there still needs a lot of improvements because real-time translation has much more different problems. Uh, a static translation is easier because you have the whole sentence, you know the meaning of the word in a particular context. Real-time translation, you have to predict, you have to wait for the word. For example, the verbs in German come at the end of a sentence. So
Mhm.
until you hear the end of the sentence, you will not be able to translate. So there are problems, but again, there are a lot of companies which are trying to work on it. I hope to see something in 5 years or even 10 years to be able to solve this problem.
Mhm.
I have a question. Kat mentioned earlier about language and culture, and I'm just wondering, what is the possibility of a machine to, because now it can sort of extract some form of meaning from text, but what is the possibility of it being able to extract and summarize on a culture based on language?
Sorry, I think I missed the last part. Could you repeat it again?
Oh yeah, on language and culture. So I was wondering what the possibility is of a machine to be able to extract sort of a summary of what a culture is like based off just a text.
Interesting question. So, if I understand right, you are trying to ask if we can understand the culture from the text.
Yeah, or if we can mine, if we can mine culture from text.
That's a good question. So I'm not sure what we can. So primarily from text, what we can understand is the meaning, or there are different patterns for every language, the way the grammatical structures and so on. There is some actually research in terms of like culture, like for example, um, there's a lot of these words, masculine and femininity words. If I understand right, like victory, strength, uh, in some languages are associated with masculinity. And so there is some fine-grained analysis done by a couple of people, like why is a particular verb or a particular noun adjective being associated to a particular gender. Also, there has also been analysis in terms of understanding text and um, uh, whether what kind of text has biases. This could be racial biases. This could be understanding male feminine biases. For example, for a long time in Google, nurse was associated with a feminine. So because the data has this information that you see that, okay, nurse, it has always seen a feminine gender associated to it. And doctor is, again, is the same. Doctor has been male for a long time. So, but we can have both. Um, so there are some biases which are also inherently in the structure or also in the data. How much to understand the culture is, again, it's a deeper question. I'm not completely sure about it.
Avinesh,
Mark?
in some respects, whether a language will survive or die is almost in your hands at Apple, because I don't know what is the minimum number of known users of a language which will trigger whether that language will ultimately get developed into the Apple framework of acceptable languages for writing queries or for even getting into translation. Do you know what that minimum viable number is for languages before they get picked up as being worthy of alphabets and translations and everything else?
Actually, that's a very, very good question. There is, so it's not really the number of people who speak the language. It's basically the number of people who use the product. So if a particular language has 500,000 users or 100,000 users, probably it's a good unit of measure. But I'm not sure. I think there should be some number which estimates. So basically, I guess all the companies might go through this profitability and so on. So if there is a need for a particular language, then you can invest X amount of money into the particular language. But I unfortunately I don't know the exact numbers, but I guess there should be some numbers.
Yeah, it must be some.
Also, on a deeper note, I would take it as a compliment that the companies, it depends on the companies whether the language dies or not. But I would still say it's not up to the companies. It is more, I think the companies enhance the process of keeping the language alive. However, I think it's also the users. If the literature is not going, so there, for example, there are some languages where people don't write anymore in that language. So in the long run, if there is no literature, if there is no books anywhere in that particular language, nobody is going to read about it, and eventually it's going to die. So in my opinion, I think it's still in the hands of the people. Enabling technology is a different question, but a language, whether it dies or keeps alive, it depends on the people who are speaking it.
Okay.
But I still have a question. Would it be not easier if everyone in the world speaks one language? Of course, beside of his mother tongue is of course, but why is it, for your opinion, so difficult?
It's a very good question. Actually, I guess British have tried to do that for a long time, but honestly, I think I would see primarily India as a very interesting example, because we always had different languages, and so the writing scripts are different, the grammatical structures are different, and people connect. There is a connection to your mother tongue, and it's very also I think the languages have some unique properties. It's good to have a global language to be able to communicate. Otherwise, we will not be able to communicate with each other. But I also think that every language has its own merits and properties, uh, which which needs to be kept preserved. Um, um, but yeah, I used to think about that earlier, when I used to think that, okay, why do we need languages? Why not everybody speaks English and that solves the problem? But the more I worked on languages, I realized that languages bring in interesting cultural phenomena in people, which is something needs to be preserved.
Yeah,
I hope I
no,
answered the question.
but it is okay. But we still have the problem that everyone speaks English.
Yes. So everybody will speak English primarily because to be able to communicate with each other. I'm not sure if I see a day where people will stop learning English and to be able to communicate with their own mother tongues with the help of the software, where you can just have it on your ears and then you don't have to learn a new language, but just your mother tongue. That's, I think, very futuristic. Maybe one day it will happen, that you don't have to learn another language, just learn your mother tongue. But it's very hard for people to be proficient in a foreign language. It takes a long time. Mother tongue is a very uh, one might be comfortable more in a mother tongue than the foreign language. Um, so yeah, so as long as there is in the education system there is multiple languages offered, there will always be the need for multiple languages.
Yeah, but it is not only a question of education, because I know families where the men and the women have different mother tongues, and they speak in their language with the children, and so suddenly the children has two mother tongues, or one mother and one father tongue, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but the perfect and never learned it in the school or somewhere else. Right.
Yeah, I agree to that. It's so right now it's becoming more and more multicultural. Um, so people are traveling a lot. People are moving to different countries. They're more exposed to more languages, and the children are learning multiple languages. Um, so I still see that there will be multiple languages are going to stay for a long, long time than having one global language.
Avinesh, as a distinguished linguist and as a scholar of language, in your opinion, is there a language which is a better language for expressing thoughts, ideas, and communication?
Um, that's a very hard question. I'm not sure if I can rate. So I guess every language is unique in itself to express what we want to communicate. I guess that's why the languages are there to be able to make some representation. So if you want to communicate, if you want to express a particular topic, it's possible in any language. However, I would still rate languages in terms of ease of learning. And so I think that's why English has become more popular. Primarily, also it's because many countries speak that language. Um, so learning English is, in my opinion at least, is on a scale of learning languages is an easier process than, I mean, there are difficulties in other words, like for example, some languages have problems with um, like determiners, articles. You have to learn masculine, feminine genders of an article. Grammatical structures are very different. So as also that a lot of languages have are written in the same style, the Roman script, it's easier to learn those languages. So I think it's based on the ease of languages um, rather than be able to communicate the same meaning.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm curious how, because you specialize at Apple in non-English languages, right? What are the challenges or some things that we might not think of when you're training a model for languages that are not in English? Because there's also, especially like languages like Chinese or more different characters where they're more visual?
That's a great question. So one big challenge that we have in the community itself is the resources. There's so many resources for English and other languages. So for English, but for other languages, there are not so many. If you want to, let's say, look at uh, so there are like top 10 or top 13 languages which are mostly has a lot of resources, but then if you want to go for Turkish or any Arabic language, the resources get less and less. That's a problem in the community itself. um, so resources is definitely one. The other one is data. So if the user is not speaking so much, not using Siri. In our case, if they're not using, so we don't have a lot of data in there. So, so it's like a chicken and egg problem. If we don't create if we don't create the software, people are not going to use it. If they're not going to use it, we will not get the data. The other problems is also like models which work for English might not work for other languages because they have a completely different grammatical structures. Um, so, so models right now are able to learn. I would still not say they're understanding meaning at a deeper level, but they can understand the semantics of what a sentence consists of. Like, for example, understanding bank in the context of river is very different from understanding bank in the context of money. So those things, our models are right now able to do it. But the moment you go to another language, um, you might end up having a different kind of words for that language, representing the same meaning. So these are primarily the top ones: data, adapting of the models, and the other thing is basically the resources. So we need to have more resources to adapt the models better.
Okay, and how? Sorry, one more question is how do you see actually um, a model adapting to say bilingualism? Because nowadays, like, because English is a very common language, and I think in most countries where English is not the main language, most people do know English, and they kind of mix it into their mother tongue. So I think also India, this is a very prominent thing.
Yeah, so I think that has two questions in there. So if I understand right, one is basically when we mix languages, how do we solve the problem? That's a challenging question. It's still an unsolved problem. It's called Spanglish, English. I think it also has some Chinese and English. It's called something else. So
Chinglish.
now it's more and more common that people are using English and their mother tongues together. So basically the problem there is to identify what part is which language. So it's called language identification. It can be solved in multiple levels from the speech or from the text. It's still an unsolved problem. Hopefully one day we'll be there. The other question is, can we transfer information from English? So as English has a lot of resources, can we transfer that knowledge to a new language? So this is in machine learning, at least it's called zero-shot learning, one-shot learning, where we don't have any data in the target language, but we have a lot of data from English. So can we transfer whatever we learn from this English data to directly apply to the target data? So there in that, there is like a most prominent research which has happened last year was from Google, where they were doing something called BERT, where this was learning representations of words or given just unsupervised data. So which is basically you don't have any annotations, no labels from the user, just the plain text. It was trying to understand the meaning of a word in the latent space. So in the space, what I mean is it takes a word and it represents it in numbers. So that's how the system tries to understand the meaning. So there is a lot of work which is going on right now to transfer information from English to other languages. But still, it's a work in progress. There's a lot of research which is going on in progress.
Avanish, this might be an indication of how silly I am or how little I know. If I take computer languages, programming languages, you see, I've always assumed that programming languages are English. You know, basic, Visual Basic, Python are all sort of, as far as I can see, English based. Am I right? Or are there some computer languages which are written in different languages, if you like?
So I'm not sure about it, but I presume they're all in English as well.
Well, that would give indication as to why English is becoming such a widely spread language. I mean, for writing and communicating.
Well, I would see that. Okay, so if I compare programming languages to languages, this is how I see. By English, you mean it's the Roman script, right? The writing style is
Yes.
that. So it's like the same. It's you have Spanish and you have English, but both of them have different structures, different the way they're written is very different. In the same as Python and Java, they're both written in English, but they are not interpretable. So they have their own structure, they have their own syntax. So,
What I was trying to
so
say, Avanish, is that I can pick up a piece of code and I can sort of roughly get what it's trying to say, even though I have no idea at the subtleties of that coding language. And I was just intrigued as to whether, say, TikTok is programmed using Chinese characters and a whole, I mean, I'm just completely ignorant of this.
so okay, so I'm not really. Probably I should also tell my ignorance, but as far as I know, most of the languages are written in English.
Ah,
But maybe I might be wrong. So
yes. Interesting, isn't it?
yeah, but I guess all the languages have been written by an English speaker at some point. So
That's very
so
presumptuous of us as
yeah. So,
speaking.
but yeah, I think it's something to research. I'll try to find if there is something.
Fascinating. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Kwan, where are you based?
I'm based in the Netherlands.
And what is your main language for communicating day to day?
I use Dutch when I'm just out on the streets, but at work I use English, and also at home because I'm living in a international community. So I use English. But then if I call home, I'm originally from Thailand. If I call home, I use Thai with a mixed bit of English as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting example. So I tell people is in India, for example, even my grandmother speaks a mix of English and the mother tongue. It is impossible. We don't even know some words. For example, apple. We don't even know what it's called in our mother tongue. So it's so commonly used that we don't even remember what it is called. So we have to think a lot to actually know what it is.
But the question is also like, was there actually a word in your mother tongue
Yeah,
for
there was,
apple?
there was.
There was. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just that we use in the English term so common that we don't even remember. We forget that word.
Well, that seems to be the advance of English as an international language, doesn't it?
Yeah, but in a way, I think it's super useful in India, primarily because we have multiple languages and multiple writing styles. So English is actually the only way we can communicate with each other, other than Hindi, which if the south, um, the south of India has 4 languages or 5 languages where the writing styles are very different from the north. Um, so so yeah, there's no other way to communicate. So English is primary source of communication, and it solves a lot of problems. Uh, but again, you cannot expect everybody to learn all the 22 languages. So
Yeah. Kat, in the States, there appears to be a sort of a divide, doesn't there, between English and Hispanic?
yes, in California, what I see at least, there's more Hispanic community, so there's more Spanish. Um, Also, it's in the it's a language in school, so it's a second primary language that people learn at school. Um, so yeah, so it's multi. The people speak, people understand, like the officers and everyone understand it. However, it's not written in Spanish. Like for example, if I take the same example back in India, is every place I go, it is written in 3 languages. So if I go to a train station, it is written in English, then Hindi, and then the local language. So that I don't see in here. So it's everything is in English anyway, but it's, as a medium of communication, you can still talk in Spanish and understand.
So I'm curious. I've been watching language programs fail in American education systems. And I've looked at many different languages, everything from Mandarin to the Euro-Indian languages. I'm wondering, could we be more successful if we were to be more immersive rather than more book taught, more practical, relating, cultural exchange? Like here in Vail, all of our workers pretty much are Latinx. They all live in that end of the valley. All of the work is in that end of the valley. And our schools are the same way. And we have private schools for white English speaking students. And our Latinx students go to the public schools. And most of them are not really that proficient after many years. So what if we were to have some kind of an exchange where immersion seems to be the development of need, where you are forced to, figure it out in your brain rather than just by rote learning? Is that a crazy idea, Avinesh?
That's a great solution, actually. On that, actually, I was thinking about it for some time. Primarily, how can we make people and cultures more immersive? So what, at least what I see uh, abroad or any place I go is, I've been in Germany, I've been in the US. I see communities. So people like to stay in their own cocoons. People like to stay in their own communities. So the goal of integrating people into a culture is, it still needs some effort. Like when I was in Germany, we had 1 million people, 1 million refugees coming to Germany, and my primary question was, it's a great idea to support people, but on the long run, what is the plan for integrating people?
Mhm.
Uh, what usually happens is there's a lot of Turkish community living by themselves. There's like a ghetto you're talking about, where people are all at one place, and there's other communities on the other side.
Mm.
I in one way, I like the solution that you're offering, where people are doing an exchange. They go to cultures. Um, um, and try to understand, learn in a better way. But I think it's more in terms of educational changes or the governmental changes that the plans have to come in. Um, as an individual, um, we can make an effort from our side how we can make other person more inclusive. I think that's where it starts.
But I have a question. Sometimes I make a joke in Austria or when I go on holidays, and someone asks me where you are from, then or where I am. I am saying I'm a European. Then people just look and don't know what I'm meaning, especially English ones. And
You mean English or British?
exactly London guys. And but it's culture, not also a question of mindset. Because if I say, okay, I'm a European, then okay, then can always I can talk what is the culture for an European. But what's I'm when then I go the next step and say, okay, I'm I don't know, I'm an Earthman. So why
That's
is it difficult to get up in the next level?
that's a. I mean, it's an attitude what people have is how do you want to perceive yourself. I always ask this question myself: is if my kids are born in the U.S., will they call themselves Indian or will they call themselves American? Um, um, so the question will always be there. You will there is something called identity crisis. We're always identifying ourselves with something. Um, I think to have more immersive feeling, I like the whole idea about calling yourself a global citizen.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
for example. Mhm.
I call
Avinash,
myself a global citizen, sir. I really like the idea.
Avinash, what would you like your kids to answer?
Um, I so basically I like the whole idea of taking the good parts of all the cultures. Uh, I want them to be a global citizen than being a particular
Yeah.
identifying themselves with some particular thing.
I
Uh,
have an interesting challenge right now. There are over 500 tribes, indigenous tribal languages between North and South America. And our team is trying to design a land acknowledgement. This is like completely off our current track, but because you are a language expert and you seem to be sensitive to cultural um, value, how would you recognize the tribes of an entire hemisphere before you engaged in an open conversation about the very thing that's threatening their existence?
I think that's a great question. Again, I'm not really sure if I can answer it, but in my opinion, what I see is the first thing we require is the art of listening. Um, before you judge or before you start providing solutions, the most important thing is to listen to the problems of the people. The moment we do that, uh, then we can come up with some solutions. Unfortunately, what I see, at least in the global scale, is that's something we should still work on, is to listen to the people, listen to, uh, in this case, the indigenous tribes, understand the culture, what is the most important thing for them, and then going forward from there.
But I have maybe a provocative question. Why is a big company, I don't know, Apple, Google, wherever, one of the big digital companies, why they are not um creating a culture of global citizens,
For
including including one language for them?
um, so I'm not sure if we. So in terms of culture at Apple, the whole idea is to have an inclusive and to have a one community. The goal is to work for the betterment of the company. But in terms of working on one language, that would be hard because we are working for the people. So if there is a need for multiple languages, we have to write software for multiple languages. So so we are trying to solve a problem for what's there. We don't, I'm not sure if as a company, it makes sense for people to dive into it. But unfortunately, I have to go to another meeting.
Okay. Mhm.
Avinesh, thank you so much for giving up your time to spend with this eclectic group of people, all speaking English, some as mother tongue, some as my original mother tongue is Russian. So we're all speaking in a different language. So thank you so much for everything which you've done. Nikki will be sharing all our contact details, if that's okay with you.
Yes, it would be a pleasure to feel free to contact me. Feel free if you have any questions for any collaborations. Yeah, we can discuss, and it would be an honor to help you all.
Thank you so much. And we'll all contact you in our mother tongue, shall we?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Have a nice evening.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Avinesh. That was fantastic.